Okay, so we're here to talk through what you weren't expecting to find, but you did find at Life Community, and just your experiences. And so, if everybody would introduce themselves, I'm going to start over here. And Dan, tell everybody who you are, and just how did you come to this place?
So Dan Nellis, been at LCC for a while, off and on since its start back in the late 90s. Graduated from Cedarville College at the time in 96 and started coming to Life Community Church. Then it was called the Suburban West Project. I'm actually related to the founding pastor, Tom Bernardo. He's married to my sister Marcia. And so I got to be in the kitchen of their house while we were talking. They're talking about starting this church, and there was just something that was enticing about it to me. I actually resisted coming to LCC when it first started because I had just moved to Columbus and wanted to do my own thing, not just go where my family was and whatnot. And I kind of quickly realized that I was missing out. I grew up in a kind of the institutional church. I grew up in kind of the big mega church environment, and there was just something about there was a very crystal clear message about what LCC was about intimacy and transparency and grace, about heart to heart connection, us with God and us with one another, and I was hooked. I was hooked from the start, and we actually moved away when my wife and I got married. 5 years later, we moved back into Columbus and we started coming to LCC, and we've been back ever since.
Cool.
So my name's Rachel Mitchell. I also grew up in the church. My dad is a retired pastor, so I might have been born in a church for all I know. We were there, every time it was open. And we even had church in our home. We did a church plant at one time. So grew up in the church, went to Grace College, graduated with a great Bible background. But then I grew really disillusioned with God's people. I love God, but his people drive me insane. And so I ran away from the church, lived here in the community, wanted really nothing to do with his people, did not want to be associated with his people. I would do anything so I did not look like a Christian because I knew the game to play. I knew when to show up on Sunday. I knew where to sit. I knew all the little tricks to play so that I could do the right thing. And I came upon these people in my everyday life, and they seemed so happy all the time and so cool. And I actually started praying for them because I was really worried about their salvation because they were so happy. And I thought they were involved in some kind of new age cult. And come to find out, they went to this church. And I was like, I've got to pray for this church. This church is weird. They have happy, vibrant people a part of it. And so I started coming. I'm like, all right, well, I got to figure this out. And so I would listen to sermons online, or I would, poke in and poke out, and all those little tricks I knew how to play. And then eventually it got to the point where I was being convicted to join a small group, and I was so scared because then I would have to be real. I'd have to take down my mask. I would have to share all my trust issues. The real Rachel would have to come out, and she is ugly. There's not a redeeming quality on my own. And it was, I don't know how long I've been here. I go by Lydia Masula.
Okay.
However old she is, that's how long I've been going to cell groups. So I need to call her and be like, Lydia, how old are you?
That's funny.
How long I've been a part of a small group. And my life has been transformed because of loving people, willing to come alongside me and say that you have dignity and you have value and you have worth. And now I'm one of those weird, crazy, joyous Christians that probably people are praying for. So that's
cool.
how I came from.
Very cool.
So I'm Kyle Fox. I came to LCC, it's been about 5 years. I went to Cedarville University. Before that, I grew up in the church in Northern Virginia, where I'm from. And I had been going to a church in Dayton. After I graduated, I spent time there in Dayton working. Then I met my wife, and she lived in Columbus. And I said, well, I really like Columbus, and we feel like this is the place that we want to call home. So we settled here, and then we were looking for churches online. We actually were Google searching churches and just kind of seeing what was out there. And we visited LCC, and we were really looking for a church that was focused on, small core groups of people. And so that was something that we were really drawn to, was the small group idea, and then centering a lot of things around small groups, whether that be, the ministries that people are doing, or really just helping each other walk through life. So that was something that was really kind of important for us. The fact that that LCC was established here, kind of in the community, also was something that we felt like was important to us. We had kind of attended some churches that that didn't have permanence. They had they were in the community, but they weren't established, kind of like LCC is here in Hilliard. So we also enjoyed that aspect of LCC. So we've been coming for 5 years, and that's our story.
Nice. My name is Monica Matheny, and I'm smiling at your story because I'm like, oh, LCC is established. Like, I forget, because that's not when I came that wasn't established. My story goes back a little further. Dan's brother-in-law was actually my youth pastor, and I did not grow up in a Christian home. I became a Christian in high school, and Tom Bernardo was my youth pastor at a huge megachurch. So my early church influence was solid teaching, tons of programs. I mean, if you had an issue of any sort, there was a program for it. I went on to college at Ohio Wesleyan here in northern Columbus. Had an incredible experience there. That was an experience where there weren't a lot of Christians around. So if you met somebody who was a Christian, there was this immediate connection of, you are my brother in Christ, you are my sister in Christ. And started probably developing this idea of Christian community and the power of that just during some really formative college years. Saw a lot of people come to Christ, had a lot of in-depth conversations, as college students do, sitting around till 3 a.m, people of different values and backgrounds. The idea of being culturally relevant and still knowing the truth was significant. I had a journalism background, so this idea of how do you understand what's absolute truth and have those conversations with people who may not share your views. And so in the middle of all this time period, Tom and his wife, who I have fond memories of from high school, came to Hilliard and started church planning. And when you're in college, you have no problem driving 45 minutes to join a small group because you have time. So I joined a cell group and bought into the vision of LCC. I had all plans to graduate and go off in the world, but as singles groups often do work out, I ended up marrying my co-leader. And so here I arrived at Life Community. So I would say it's been a big part of my story and my family stories. And what's interesting is back in 2006, for those of you who might not know, Life Community started a church plant. And so my husband and I went with that. And it did not make it, but God did amazing things. But when that closed up shop, we did not assume we would come back to LCC. We really stopped and said, okay, was that a church for a season of our life? And where we're at now, where do we feel like God is leading us? And so we chose again to say, hey, we're still sold on this vision, and we came back. And so we really have, I feel like, grown up here.
I'll just echo. I feel like I use the expression that when I was at LCC and left, like it ruined me with my church experiences. We went out to Arizona, and I made the mistake of trying to like find an LCC out there, and it was really difficult to find, and it wasn't fair to try to do that. But that expression of like it just stuck with me. Like I kind of got ruined by it. Like I had the problem of comparing everything than to my experience, to what LCC was about. And so we ended up coming back here. It's interesting that you had that same experience.
Yeah, and as someone who has walked that same journey as Monica and Dan, my wife and I were gone for 2.5, 3 years, serving in a part-time ministry role in another church, and walked that same journey. When that road was ending, we did the same kind of thing. Like, are we really? Is this the place? And it's fascinating because there's stuff that goes in the literature, right? Like we have a set of core values. We have a statement of faith that we adhere to. But it's some of the stuff around here, and I remember several conversations actually in maybe that first 6 to 12 months back, where I was still unsettled in my soul. But I remember several conversations, actually one with Dan that he probably has forgotten by now. But Dan actually looked at me and he said, like, why are you here now? Like, why? I know why you were here before. Why are you here now? And I had to articulate some of the things. And we're actually in this series kind of talking about some of that stuff, because being in any church, but particularly I think a church like ours, it actually, we ask things of you to be here, and it's one of the things that marks us, that we invite you to not be passive, and we're going to talk about that. But along the way, we're going to talk about some things now that are sort of, I think, are maybe unique around here. We just don't find them in other places as we look around. It's not that we're perfect, right? We know that no church is perfect. It's made up of people with their imperfections. But the first thing that we're going to talk about is that Life Community Church really wants to be a church that's in this, like in life for the long haul. We really are, we're allergic to quick fix. We're suspicious of rapid expansion, and maybe sometimes to a fault even, but it's rooted in the notion that the work of God in someone's life, the good work that Paul writes in Philippians, that he's begun in you, he's going to complete. It's gonna keep going, keep moving. And so we're just really about that. And so we want to start this conversation with that idea, and how have you seen that as a part of your church experience? What does that look like for you at Life Community?
Yeah, I guess as being a Christian for most of what I can remember of my life, it resonates with me because, my life is kind of this trajectory towards Christ, and the trajectory can sometimes waver a bit and whatever, but the reality is it's a long haul. It's not a one time. I can point to certain events, but I can't point to one specific thing that has made me who I am today. It's a series of things. So that resonates with me, and sharing that with the body of Christ.
And I realize too, it could be an interesting thing even to talk about it this way, because this topic doesn't lend itself to a grand story. You know what I mean? Like, I remember the time where I'd had really slow growth over a long period of time. We remember the big moments. But I'll maybe share this. I recall in our story, in the story of Life Community, one Sunday morning, I don't cry, but sometimes my eyes leak a little bit. And my eyes were leaking as I watched a man and a woman who had been divorced for about 20 years stand next to each other in worship on a Sunday morning. And it happened because their son was a part of our church and had been a long part of our church, and he had just sort of brought them along. It just, hey, come and at first it was, mom would come in for a Sunday, and then, she'd be back 2 months later. But in the meantime, dad would be there every so often. And over time, they just kind of gradually were introduced to the Lord. And this particular Sunday, the son and his family were gone. But both of the mom and his mom and dad, again, divorced for many years, and I know the story enough to know it wasn't like a friendly separation. It was a really difficult situation. And there they stood together, worshiping and praising God. And it's those kinds of moments where I think, like, okay, we're in a marathon and not a sprint. I guess just what is that? What does it look like? What does it take out of us in order to do that? What do you have to believe or practice in order for those kinds of things to be true of us?
And when I think about life community and I think of key words, I just hear the word grace. I feel like that's what we're known by. That's what we're asked to exhibit. That's what we're asked to receive from God ourselves. So if you ask me what it means for the long haul to really grow in our walks, I just say it's grace upon grace. I've received it here. I've learned to see Jesus through the context of there is nothing I can do, not one thing. There's a transparency in our leadership, in our sermons. I have never once thought, oh, I should put that person on a pedestal. And when people in leadership have had struggles, they have been asked to live lives of integrity, but also have been met with a great deal of grace. And so I think that changed me and gave me permission to say, you're not gonna like arrive in your faith till you get to heaven, and that's okay.
And not everybody wants that. Like, what is it in us that doesn't, maybe at first blush, because the overriding arc of this is, I didn't even know to want that. Why don't we want that? Like, why is it that in some ways that grace like that can even turn people off?
Well, where else do we see it? You know, when I look at my world and everything is outcome driven and it's what you can do and how fast you can do it and this great business model, but don't I long for rest? Don't I long to be appreciated? Don't I long to be just enough? And it's awkward because I don't know what to do with that when someone says, oh, you're fine how you are. And I'm like, I'm an ugly, hot mess. And then for someone to say, no, but you're beloved because of you have dignity, you have an identity, and you have a destiny. And those are beautiful words that you can rest in. But does the world offer that to me? No. False hopes, yeah. And I can't accept it because I don't see it. And when you see it in a real place, you're like, you got to bottle this up. What are you doing? You got to sell this. I'm like, no, we're just going to, step upon step. We're going to go on this marathon and on this journey and trust God to get there. Who is this God that you know of? I must meet him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, if all we're preaching, all we're exhibiting is a message of a future in heaven with Jesus and God, and if that's the gospel. Be saved for that, then the quick fix is you're saved for some, but we're not. I mean, there is that salvation, but like there's a daily salvation, it's sanctification. There's a growth. There's whatever holiness. There's something that has to happen every day. A dying to myself, all that if you're going to be really disappointed if you're thinking, boy, this is not what I signed up for. I thought I was signing up for, just kind of something else, and just that idea of a future is worth pursuing, but like that we have the kingdom of heaven is here and now, and when we talk about transformation, and be transformed, like that's a daily dying to yourself kind of. That is a very long view of the gospel, I think. So
I also think this is something I'm grappling with in my own walk and understanding of God and who he is and the mystery of him. If my God is only a good God in the future, then that's a very small God.
Sure.
But if I have a God that can be here and now and help me with my process, that's a really big God.
Yep.
How big is your God? Is he here and now and there? Yes. My God is both.
Yep.
How cool is he?
Yeah.
That's funny, Rachel and Tom, you say, how cool is he that he's so big? And Tom, you asked earlier, why is it that maybe people don't want a God like that? And early on in our years at LCC, there was a gentleman here who grew up in the church and kind of had his Christianity in his box, and his life started to just grow and his walk grew. And he invited his family into that. And he shared with his mom, like, Mom, we could pray boldly. We could know God better. And he shared with his mother and encouraged her to pray boldly. And Mom saw God move in a very personal and intimate way, and it freaked her out. And she said, I don't ever want to play like that again. That was just too much for me. And I remember I was really young, like I was maybe my early 20s, and I'm like, why wouldn't you want to know God like that? Like I just was so confused by that. And I think as I've gotten older, I thought it is scary when you realize how big God is. And not everybody, right? Not everybody wants God to be that personal.
Sure.
And so it's a scary model at our church because we say not only do we want to know God that big, we would like to know each other and open ourselves up to that. And I go, not everybody wants to sign up for that.
Oh, it's horrifying at times with, the growth and change that we talk about requires an awful lot of us. And I think another one of the scary things is this transparency that's kind of Rachel's hinting at, that I have to be able to say, like, this is my garbage. And I think I'm afraid of it. I'm going to assume many people are afraid of it. I'm afraid of it. I don't want to be exposed, let alone be forced into a place where I have to expose myself. And so, trying to, but that's where growth over time is found, is when I recognize the very, very big God has, for some reason, we would say is love, right? We understand as love, has taken an interest in me and the mess of my life. And I don't have to perform for him. I don't have to do anything to merit his favor in my life. He favors me. And not favors me somehow in all of his bigness, he favors every one of us. Like it's not like favoriting that we normally think of. And those ideas they're so countercultural, because I can't quantify it in ways that I'm comfortable with. I can't measure it. I can't put it on a leaderboard to decide who the winner was. I can't do anything except just sort of submit to it. And it freaks people out. It has freaked me out when it happens. And it's one of the big crazy things that God does. But to be afraid of it is to sort of stunt that movement. And so we're called, right? We're called to be true to it.